I started my career 20 years ago selling copiers to law firms in downtown Denver, meeting with these senior partners and these managing directors and trying to create some kind of differentiation between me and my competitors and talk about how well our service department worked. It was an extremely difficult way to learn sales and way to learn business because it frankly required just a lot of hard work to create the kind of funnel that you needed to be successful. And what I remember of it was that the company was always a little bit behind. We never quite had the deals that we needed to be able to hit those numbers at the end of the month. So there was always a scramble and a panic to make it happen. What deal can you bring through, that kind of stuff. And in the midst of all of that, one of the leasing agents that we worked with, Rob Parker, was this calming presence. He had the sales acumen, he had the demeanor and the peaceful spirit to be able to come into that chaos and talk through a problem and find a solution that worked for everybody, including the client. And it was always kind of a breath of fresh air when he walked in the door. So Rob and I have caught up recently, and he since then has gone through and led several teams in finance, and had a great career. He's doing some sales consulting work too. You'll hear about in a second. But I asked Rob to come and talk to the audience about what he's seen in his sales career and what's worked for him, and what the definition of a 2.1 sales or a top performing sales professional is from his perspective. So please come listen to Rob and learn what you can from someone who taught me the basics many, many years ago.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. Definitely appreciate it. Yeah, my career spans back 33 years when I entered the office equipment space. And this was back in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And kind of went about my business then, seeing all these really successful, or what appeared to be successful in my mind at that time, at the end of the bullpen, and going, I want to be one of those guys. I want all the stuff they have, guys and gals, sorry. So went through all that, had a great copier career. As I say, the toner gets into your blood, but I did have an opportunity years later to kind of slide over to the finance side and help other copier salesmen, office technology salesmen, be successful in their careers, introducing finance, sharing creative ways to use that. And that career turned out to be, that was about 20 years of my career was doing that. A large tenure with US Bank, and then another senior leadership role with Wells Fargo, before moving over, deciding I could better suit and be better helpful as an independent. So I moved over and created Parker Power Sales, and that is where you rediscovered me, and here we talk. So
yeah, great. Well, long career, and I know we were talking before this call about just a number of President's Award trips you've gone on over the years. Which one's your favorite? What's the best trip you've been on?
Gosh, there was so many, and like I was telling you, once you make one, you never want to miss one because they're just so much fun. One of them, my favorite, probably comes down to, it was in the early days, and it was Cabo San Lucas, back before Cabo became Americanized, as you might say, and it was still pretty raw, pretty straight Mexico. And it was, gosh, it was just so magical and so fun. And that drove me further to make sure I never missed another trip. So,
yeah, I've had a couple of trips like that myself, and I've certainly enjoyed the beach and hanging out and having someone else being able to enjoy that on someone else's dime is always
absolutely, absolutely, and not having to plan. They had all planned out for you, and it was just an incredible time. Every day was a great day. So.
Well, I guess I'm curious about here, specifically with this podcast, is talking about the difference between someone who is, a quality salesperson who hits quota or gets close to quota every year, and then that top 2.1% of performers, the people who are at the top of the board, are going on President's Club trips, certainly, but, are probably grinding away while they're on the beach, right? Enjoying working with clients then. And what the purpose of the 2.1 sales community and podcast is to think about the differences between those two people, and how do you get to that next level, to be one of the very top performing salespeople in your organization. So I guess I wonder, you've worked with, I'm sure, hundreds, maybe thousands of salespeople throughout your career. What have you seen as the difference between someone who's in that top category and someone who's living a good life but just not quite where they could be?
That's a great question, and one I've thought about often, and what is really the difference. And it's a fine line between why is somebody sitting on one side of the line versus somebody excelling on the other. And to me, a lot of it comes down to where your heart lies. And if you really are passionate about the customer and doing what's right for them, like you're doing it to help people versus help your wallet. And that might sound counterintuitive to why you go into sales, but it does change to the level of success you'll have. And you think about nights where somebody's acting like a sales guy and out having a good time, out with their buddies, yada, 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 versus they're at home going through the files and doing the homework and preparing for the next day and getting ready to succeed and to sell and continue to drive that success. So there's that fine line, but where your heart is. And part two of that becomes it's good to be aggressive as a salesperson, but it's better to me if and where I've heard customers say the difference is they go, are you aggressive or are you pushy? It's okay to be aggressive, but it's not okay to be pushy. And again, if you truly care about your customer and you know you're doing the right thing for them, you're going to be perceived in the right way, and you'll succeed far more times than if they sense it's you're just in it to get the sale. Well, then chances are somebody else is presenting in a different fashion and they're going to go with them. So those are sort of the two key components in my mind that changes where your success pattern goes.
So it's a willingness to kind of work on behalf of your client, right? That's a pretty critical component, and we've heard that quite a
Right.
number of times actually on the podcast. But then also you mentioned just this passion, this willingness to work longer hours than the next guy after time. Is there something more to it though? Is there a difference in approach? I mean, from the client's perspective, do they have a different experience working with a 2.1 salesperson versus just a guy who's doing well but not there?
Well, again, I still think, Stephen, it gets back to where you where your care level is and why are you doing it. And I think about I mean, I just had an experience the other day it was at a cell phone company, and I was completely turned off by the sales rep just based on I could just tell by his mannerisms, his tonality, the words he was using. I go, it was like the fast buck and not really giving two hoots about really what I was there for, what I cared about. And I mean, if that's your pattern, you're going to get the results that go with that pattern, which is not very good.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I also think, there have been times in my career when I've been struggling to hit quota one month or, like where things don't always go well, of course, right?
Right.
And I can be having an interaction with a client, and I think some of that, the hunger for the deal might be coming through, or they might be able to see through. They might get a sense that my quota is coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's always been a challenge for me is to make sure that even when my own personal goals and ambitions or needs are jeopardized, right, to still act in the client's best interest and try to save them, right?
Right. Absolutely. Um, and I think from my experiences back when I was selling copiers, and I've been even on the finance side, it's that old cliche you hear about the funnel and what's going in and how much comes out the bottom, which is how we make our livings. Um, I always made sure it was so full that no matter what the month was going like, there was enough coming out the bottom. So I rarely would miss the quota per se, because if you make sure that basics are done, then everything else changes. And how you work and I mean, we all got to feed our families. So yeah, desperation will set in and it will show
Right.
if if there's just not enough being worked. So
Yeah, I've talked to salespeople in the past who've said I would have hit quota, but the Johnson deal didn't close the way I wanted it to, right?
right.
Or I pushed to next month. and that's always rung hollow to me, or it's untrue, right? You also would have hit quota if you'd had 6 Johnson deals in your pipeline, and weren't dependent on one deal closing
Right.
to make a number, right?
Well, I did when I was managing, I would show people my funnel, and I go, when I forecasted, let's say it was $100,000, what I was thinking was going to make up that $100,000 isn't always the mix that came out the bottom.
Yeah,
Sometimes it was a completely different mix, but I had enough to make sure, as you just mentioned, if something's falling off or being delayed, hopefully not falling off, just delaying, you got other stuff that's suddenly propelling and moving in that's into its place. So again, it's a numbers game and really just caring. It really does make a difference.
yeah, the passion behind it and working hard for it. So, I mean, you've obviously had a very, long and successful career in sales. I'm wondering if you go way back to when you first started and think from there to now, like is there a big win that stands out for you? Maybe not necessarily in like financial sense, like the biggest dollar value, but a win that you really fought hard for and were happy and proud that you were able to take across the line.
Right. And that bounces all over in, when you have a long career, you've done a lot of deals and a lot of selling different things. But in this case, it came down to me, which was a win and one I was very proud of, was coming back to an incentive trip where the company had set 4 criteria. You had hit all 4 to make this trip, this cruise. And there was no way I was going to miss. And I worked so hard. And again, so that's the perfect contest when you're driving this extra effort and behavior. And at the end of the day, and it came down literally New Year's Eve, hours before midnight, dealing with somebody at their home, getting them to sign a document to get it back to me, and then working with home office to get them to still get it on the books so I get credit, hence making the making the contest. And yeah, then they had to I earned a little extra praise for being the only one who truly earned the trip. They had to re-rack and lower the expectations for some others, so I wasn't alone. But man, it sure felt good and was rewarded even at another level just for making that achievement. So it was pretty cool.
Well, and as you're sitting there on the beach or wherever you were at, you're probably thinking back to all the effort that went into it and the success of it.
Absolutely. And I think back of the folks I was competing with, these were some not your average sales guys. These were very proven folks, sales professionals. So but we did have a great time when we all went.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A President's Club trip by yourself was
It
probably not
would have
all.
went so fun.
No. Well, how about your hardest loss? Is there one that's still stuck in your craw after all these years that got
Yes.
you?
Yes, there is. and it's fun. I talk about this one quite a bit. And it was funny, it's a lot of this is going back to my copier career when it was really, selling a product versus a financial almost commodity, which is kind of very different worlds. But I remember kind of getting into where it might have been a time where my funnel wasn't as full. I can't recall exactly, but I was competing. I was selling Canon at the time. And I was up against Xerox. It was a larger deal. And I remember, being taught in the basics, right? You never slam your competitor, focus on your own strengths, yada, yada, yada. And I somehow kind of panicked and was a little bit intimidated because I was going against Xerox direct, the corporate level. And I slid into a bit of a pattern where I was focusing on them and their shortfalls, not on my strengths.
Mhm.
And it ended up kind of turning the buyer off, and I ended up losing the deal. I shouldn't have. We had a superior product at the time. And that still bothers me that I let that happen. I knew better, but again, insecurity got the better of me at that time. And I swore I'd never let that happen again. So,
You know what's interesting about that story is for me, if I think about the deals that got away, or when I've talked to other people, on this podcast or elsewhere about deals that got away, usually the story is told about the client who made the error and didn't see, my product, and it's rare, I guess, for someone to say that I messed up, that I made a mistake, and the result was that I lost the deal. And that's essentially what you just said was you kind of
mhm.
owned the outcome from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a hard lesson, but I learned well. Here I am talking about it 30 years later. So, and yeah, that's a hard way to learn. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least you learn. It's an expensive way to learn, but it's better than repeating the mistake, of course.
yes.
I wonder, you've also worked with, I'm sure, people above you and a lot of individuals over the years. Is there somebody that you've worked with who's really inspired you and has, kind of prompted you to work a little harder or to think a little more creatively about business?
Yeah, I would have to say 2 leaders ago, when I was with one of the banks, had a lot of faith in me and I loved it. And, I remember him coming to me and saying, Rob, you got a blank page. Do what you need to do. That's a big statement in my world. Especially, you're a new leader, and not a new leader, but you just become a senior leader. A lot of people underneath you, a lot of people we're going to be impacted by any decisions I made. But the way he mentored me, supported me, put the faith in me, and said, "Go do it," was tremendous, and that just still melts my heart today. That to have somebody of that level have that kind of
Yeah.
confidence.
It enabled you to do what you needed to do to be successful, and I'm sure there was also supportive kinds of things or advice he gave along the way to kind of help you figure it out too.
It's amazing if you empower people and get out of their way, what they can accomplish. It really is.
It is. So when you work as a sales leader and you have a team that's out there chasing deals and I know you've done this in parts of your career, is it the same kind of thing where you're trying to empower people and just inspire them to have that passion about it, or what's your approach?
Yes. In fact, in that team where I had 5 senior leaders and then many reps underneath of them, in the feedback was always they again the same appreciation I had to my leader, they had of me because they'd never had where somebody just got out of their way. And whereas I mean, I saw my job as being there to help them and help facilitate success, right? It was their job to do the work. I just needed to make sure I removed the obstacles in their way, and then off we went, and we were very successful. And that's happened probably in my last 3 major assignments. Was my style won't change; it's always been the same.
Yeah, so servant leadership, clear the brush in front of the
Mhm.
team, get them to get to work and stay out of the way, right? That's the approach.
Yeah, and you interject support where you can, and it's amazing. And then communicate, right? Communicate as much as you can. You can never over communicate, and then watch what happens to the culture within not only the sales team but the support team. So if everybody's kind of operating under the same mode, it's super powerful in my mind. The
And you
results
feel
always
like the
prove it.
clients
So
probably feel that too, right? They're seeing the alignment right within the company they're working with.
absolutely, they
Yeah.
want to do business with you because yeah, you can just sense good culture. And then customer service and people, everybody caring makes a difference, right? If everybody feels they're involved in the process and understand what their role is in the process and how that impacts their customers, everybody's collective customers, right? You've heard the old saying, everybody's in sales, whether you realize it or not. Anybody who touches a customer in some form is in sales.
Yeah.
And how you work those interactions is critical. So if everybody is of that same mindset, wow, do you have a powerful engine driving revenue?
I've worked for organizations in the past where that wasn't the culture, where the feeling was that the sales team were supposed to go out and chase down business, and then the delivery team were supposed to deliver the business, and that if the deal went south and didn't come together, that was typically the sales team's fault for setting them up for failure,
Right.
um, and vice versa, right? The sales team always felt it was delivery team's fault if something went poorly because they were the architects that designed the thing that should have gone exactly right. So I think that kind of
I agree.
cultural alignment is actually really difficult to achieve.
It is,
Yeah.
but it will unfold. It will unfold. You just need to start the march, and everybody will start to fall in line if they like the parade. It's pretty cool.
Start the march and everyone falls in line at the light of the parade. I like that. So that makes me think too. When another session with another good friend of mine, we were talking about sales, a salesperson's role as a leader, and what we concluded in the conversation was that a salesperson's a leader because they're leading their internal team, kind of rally them around a piece of business they're trying to create for the company, and then they tend to be a leader for the client side too, because especially with big enterprise deals, it's usually a complex buying decision with multiple stakeholders and lots of people who can say no and only one guy who can say yes, and
Yeah.
it's really quite
Right.
tough. So I mean, I don't know, does that resonate too with you about, the role of a salesperson as a leader on both sides of the fence?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because if if somebody's not grabbing the horn and leading the charge and getting everybody on the same page, it just leads to disaster. It won't work. And if it's not the salesperson, then who?
Yeah,
Right? And there's no way other than the salesperson who's in the middle would know all that. So it has to be us.
yeah. Well, and the salesperson tends to represent the business to the client and represent the client to the business, back and forth. So
Right.
because of the position they're in, they they're, like you say, they're the only person who's really in the right place to be able to lead both groups and get them all working in concert together to come to the end of the deal, right?
Right. Well, we're the quarterback, right? The liaison, the quarterback, call it what you will. It's to make sure things aren't getting dropped and communications flowing. I mean, it's the critical role. And again, it kind of leads back to what I was referring to about where your heart lies. If you don't really care, right? You're just hoping the sale comes through and you get paid. Well, then you're going to get kind of average bad results and bad experiences for everybody
Right.
versus ensuring that it's a great experience for everybody. That, I mean, that's how we get paid. That's a big part of why we get paid and who we are and why we chose the career in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because that's what we like to do. We like to be around people. We like to communicate. We like to talk. We like, it's just, it's it's fun. That's where the pieces fall together.
Well, and it's these relationships that we build out, right? There's guys I've known for 15, 20 years that I've been talking to about business for that long, and we're catching up over companies we both left long ago, right? And
Right, exactly.
I think if you have the passion you're describing and that willingness to work in your client's best interest, then those relationships can become decades long, and you can end up have this compounding effect where you know doing the right thing for a client early in your career leads to a big success later on in the career too.
No question. It should come naturally, but if it doesn't, then it becomes a habit. It just becomes your standard MO of how you do business. And as you become known, if that becomes part of your brand, that is an excellent place to be. And that's when you become more in demand and your success continues to grow. And if you're seeking other opportunity, as a lot of us do as we go through our sales careers, that's what gets you there.
Yeah.
Not just half doing things, right? It's really about care and passion.
Yeah. Right. As a personal brand, care and passion. So I think you're working right now and helping companies develop sales teams and helping salespeople develop into professionals. And I guess I'd be interested in learning a little more about the work you're doing currently.
Well, what I'm doing now is amongst a number of different contracts is doing some fractional sales management. And what that's doing is helping fill a void of, especially for small and mid-sized businesses who can't necessarily afford a really good sales manager, but need the help. And a lot of times it's the owner doing the work himself and trying to, navigate all this stuff where you can, they can now pay a fractional part of cost, really just buying less time, but having somebody who's very productive and very effective and efficient at what they're doing to get them the results they're looking for and giving them a lasting, proven, repeatable sales system. And yes, folks, if you don't think there's a process and a system to sales, there is. It's not all about flying by the seat of our pants and living off our personalities. We do have to have
Yeah.
some processes in place to help ensure, that success. So that's what I've been doing, and it's fun. And there's a demand for it. Just like partial CFOs and CEOs, small
Yeah.
businesses need help. Yeah.
So when you come into an organization and they have some challenges, they are underserving their clients or whatever the challenges might be, like how do you go about coming to an understanding of what those challenges are, and then how do you develop a plan for solving them?
Well, we have an audit, so we sit down and spend a few hours, with all the key stakeholders within an organization, and look at how things are being done today. What are the processes, even whether it be lead creation and different processes, et cetera, and what technologies are they using to help enhance that? And then we kick out a very over 100-page report, and we kind of go through it and go, here are the basically break it down to 6 steps, and we're going to start at 1 and work our way through. You can do it yourself. I can help do it for you, but if to get where you want to get, you need to follow this map. Again, it's a process, and get these things done and in place for a lasting impact on your business. And it virtually pays for itself. So
Yeah, yeah. What's the most common problem that you have diagnosed when you go through that assessment?
oh gosh, lack of control. Well, lack of just process in general. Nobody really, you have a senior person who seems to have figured it out on their own, and they're running around doing what they do and very successful. And then there's the lesser experienced folks that are just kind of meandering and kind of doing the same thing over and over. The problem is they're doing the same thing over and over that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So, and then just, helping that process. And then again, lead generation is a major thing, figuring out and identifying what that is, what is working, what isn't when you get a lead, adding value or assigning value to these leads or lead sources, and then to just kind of generate the process from there. It's it's interesting. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You flow chart it and really kind of get it nailed down. But the short and long-term results are pretty amazing. So
Yeah, you're formalizing the process, and yeah, I've seen this at a lot of small businesses have this where it's a passionate owner is doing what he can, but runs out of hours in the day and has to start hiring out a team, and then if they don't have something more structured and formalized, it can be quite hard for his success to be replicated by other people.
right, and it's usually not his favorite task, so therefore it's not done well. And then a lot of times that mistake's made where you take your best salesperson and make them a sales manager, and then they are only half as effective at selling from where they were, and then they're only average at best trying to manage other people. I mean, it's managing and selling are 2 completely different skills and tasks, quite frankly. So one doesn't make the other good, right? Whether you could be a successful manager but a terrible salesperson, and vice versa. So
Yeah, what makes you successful in one job will probably make you fail in the other, right?
quite
Salespeople tend to
possibly,
be
yes.
successful because they can sidestep conflict, because they can, kind of yield their own will to the client's will, and kind of, find alignment that way. And
Yeah.
sales
Mhm.
leadership is more about looking for conflict, or looking for opportunities to course correct the person they're working with, and it's a totally different motion, isn't it?
It is very different. And it was an adjustment. I got thrown into it going back from my copier days. I wasn't ready. Mentally, I was not ready to be a manager. I didn't really want to be a manager, but you're being promoted, blah, blah, blah. And I hated it. I did. There was nothing I liked about it. And then I had an opportunity to jump back over to sales, and I had some unproven or unfinished business, let's say. I wanted to prove to some folks there was one thing that I just hadn't had the opportunity to do. I wanted to make sure I could do it. So I did that. And then I was ready, right? I'd kind of checked off the boxes in my own mind. Now I was ready to transition and move to the next path of my career. But I had to do it when I was mentally ready. I couldn't, you can't force people over. It's just not, it won't work. It just doesn't work.
No, I did it when I was 24, and that's awfully young. That's awfully
Yes, it was. You're still dripping back here.
yeah, totally was. Well, I guess I have one question too. Is I'm sure there are people out there who have the passion, who are working long hours, and who are really trying to succeed, and maybe just haven't found the right opportunity or haven't figured out their rhythm, and it's just not working for them. And I wonder if you have any advice for those people who have the work ethic but might not have had the results quite yet.
It's a good one. If in speaking of sales, if you're not selling something you like and that you believe in, you'll probably not be successful ever selling it, no matter how hard you work, right? It comes across, people see it in our demeanor, they can just tell if you're full of it or not.
Yeah.
So my first thing would make sure you're selling something that you really, really have some passion about and know you can share your passion with somebody else and you're solving some problems out there for them. And then it becomes fun, right? Sales should be fun.
Yeah.
And the more fun it becomes, the easier it is to do the long hours because it is so fun. And success breeds success. And yeah, I worked hard and I got these sales and gosh, that was super fun. Well, I want to keep having this fun, but I got there because I did the work first, right? You can't have this glossy life of a salesperson without doing the work first. You just can't skip that step. I mean, you might get lucky. Maybe some guys do. Maybe they're so supernatural at it. But I think for every successful sales guy and gal, you can look behind the scenes and learn that there was a lot of other work going on that none of us ever saw.
Yeah.
I believe that's what happens. So
Well, like you say, there's people who are working on New Year's Eve trying to get the deal across the line so they can go on the President's Club trip, and everyone sees the President's Club trip and the big deals, but you might not see the long hard hours that happen otherwise, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely. I believe all those things. And it wasn't just because they work for me. I've seen it work with, all the successful folks I've worked with and managed over the years. So
Yeah. Well, and I count myself lucky to be one of those people. And I
indeed,
really appreciate you jumping on the call and talking about your career. And of course, I wish you the best of luck with your new endeavors. And thank you so much.
appreciate it. Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff. It's still deep within my heart. So thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah.
And all you listening. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.